Wagwan. Good morning, good night, welcome back. And if you're listening for the first time, welcome to episode 18 of The Real Situation, where we give you a taste of Jamaican politics. My name is Melanie Byfield, and before diving into the happenings in constitutional reform land, I'd like to say hello and goodbye. Hello and best wishes to the Governor-General, Sir Patrick Allen. He recently underwent spinal surgery at the University Hospital of West Indies. His surgery was led by neurosurgeon Dr. Carl Bruce and his team in the Tony Thwaites wing. Dr. Bruce is a former student of Manchester High School, so big up yourself, Doc. And I'd like to say goodbye to former Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey. On January 29, the judge wasn't moved by his tears when he gave him 11 years in prison for extortion, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and acting as a foreign agent. Dude accepted bribes, including cash and gold bars. His plea for mercy because of his lifetime of good deeds and work he did while was in the Senate were denied. The judge said, somewhere along the line, you became, I'm sorry to say, a corrupt politician. The judge also entered a forfeiture order, so im tekwe ala im ill-gotten sitnem. How much was that? About $992,000 US. His wife is also awaiting sentencing. Funny thing about it is that this wasn't his first corruption trial rodeo. In 2018, he was accused of accepting gifts from a Florida eye doctor and failing to disclose those gifts. That trial ended in a hung jury, and the Justice Department dropped the charges. So, last episode we talked about the sitting of the first Joint Select Committee hearing, right? On January 22nd, the second Joint Select Committee meeting took place. Where was the opposition leader? Not in attendance. So let's talk about that a little more before we get into the meeting itself. Okay. Ms. Malahoo Fort said that she had been informed that Mark Goldin would be absent. Also absent would be Anthony Hilton and Donna Scott Motley. Ms. Malahoo Fort said that the questions that he needed answers for from the head of government, she said he didn't utilize the normal protocol, meaning that there was no indication that the Prime Minister had been written to. So she said, I have therefore concluded that it may be quite appropriate to use the very forum of this Joint Select Committee to answer those questions on behalf of the Prime Minister, but I'm not going to do that today. Why this fussing and a fighting? You want to know? I want to know. Well, earlier that week, Mark Goldin had said that his parliamentary caucus wasn't taking part in the meetings, right? The Joint Select Committee meetings, until the Prime Minister divulges why his administration want to remain with the Privy Council. Mark Goldin said, we aren't boycotting the committee, but until the Prime Minister, who's been promising for over a year to say what his position is on this issue, that's the Privy Council, until he comes to the Jamaican people and explains his position, we are pausing our participation with that committee. Okay, so what happened at the meeting? The Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs prepared a presentation, very nice one, I might add as well, and it basically went through the contents of the bill for the benefit of the committee and for the members of the public. Ms. Malahoo Fort formally introduced the technical team of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, and Christopher Harper, who is Senior Director of Constitutional Reform, is the person who made the presentation. And he said that he was not going to focus on every single clause, just like the main areas, right? So what were the key areas that he was going to focus on? The Jamaicanization of the Constitution, the office of the President, expansion of the Senate, modification of the alteration provision, that is Section 49, enhancement of citizenship, the citizenship provision, qualification and disqualification of membership in Parliament, and the incorporation of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica into the Constitution. So let's start with Jamaicanization of the Constitution. So, and I'm just going to take little snippets of what happened during Mr. Harper's presentation. So what he did say is this is an ongoing process, and that a preamble, is being inserted, which has the national symbols and emblems into a new fourth schedule. So, but here's my thing, right? So yeah, that includes the motto, out of many one. I mean, I think this is a good opportunity personally to revisit some of these things, like out of many one. I mean, I never really understood that motto per se. The first Africans arrived in Jamaica in the early 1500s, and Jamaica is 96% black African. So I don't understand that, yeah, as I said, the out of many one. Philip Sherlock, who made a submission for the preamble, had a line in his submission which was, "From tribulation the people harvested triumph." From tribulation the people harvested triumph. I love that line. I really think it reflects the journey of the Jamaican people, I mean, considering Jamaica had such a brutal history of slavery, yeah, Jamaica's triumphed over that real tribulation. Yeah, anyway, let me know what you think about that. The coat of arms, again, maybe it could be more in line with Jamaican culture and identity. I mean, there's a pineapple in it, but pineapple isn't actually an indigenous fruit of Jamaica. Of course, you have the national fruit if you want to stick a fruit in there, right? You have ackee. And actually, June plum is native to Jamaica. Land of wood and water, the Blue Mountains, the longest range in Jamaica, the longest mountain range in Jamaica, scans 4 parishes, right? Portland, St. Thomas, St. Mary, and St. Andrew. There's the hummingbird, which is native to Jamaica. Or maybe it could even take something from the Akan people, right, who would have represented the majority of African people that were enslaved in Jamaica. So I was actually looking at the coat of arms, actually, for Ghana. And Akan people are primarily from Ghana. Their coat of arms, so the first quarter has a sword used by chiefs. It's a symbol for the traditional authority of Ghana, right? The second quarter has the presidential palace on the Gulf of Guinea, and that symbolizes the national government. The third quarter has a shield showing the cocoa, I hope I pronounced that properly, tree, and that embodies the agricultural wealth of Ghana. The fourth quarter shows a gold mine, which stands for the richness of the industrial minerals and natural resources in Ghana. There's a gold lion centered on a green St. George's cross with gold and blue, and that represents the continuous link between Ghana and the Commonwealth of Nations. There's a crest, which is the Black Star of Africa, and there's also a shield with 2 golden eagles with the order of the Star of Ghana suspended from their necks. And then there's the motto, freedom and justice on it. So, yeah, like I was saying, maybe it could be a little more, synonymous with Jamaica. So, what were we talking about? The Jamaicanization of the Constitution. Yeah. So the Constitution won't actually be a new document. It would be an amendment so that the second schedule remains in force, and then it becomes one with the amendments inside the bill. So next on to the office of the president. Again, I'm just taking snippets for a minute here. One of the things is the qualification, right? The qualification says that you need to be a citizen by birth or 3 generations of descent, no further than a grandparent, and ordinarily resident for 10 or 15 years immediately preceding the date of nomination. So I was wondering, what is ordinarily resident? So I looked up some definitions for that, and pretty much a common theme is you are ordinarily resident if you're subject to employment and tax laws, right? There was actually a case in Britain. It's not an act of Parliament. There's a case called RV versus R, which is the monarchy, right? The king, the queen, whatever, versus Barnet London Borough Council. And it basically said that ordinarily resident was where there was a regular or constant mode of life in a particular place or for the time being, right? And a person can be ordinarily resident in more than one country at the same time. And they look for things like, are you paying utility bills there? Are you employed there? Do you have close family there? So a couple of factors to think about. So that appointment language I was looking at as well, that problematic appointment language. And I mean, what was his name again? Mr. Harper did say that this language is still open for further discussion, but I believe it may well need it. So basically, I don't see where, and they did say that changes were made from the report, from the CRC report, as a direct response to feedback from the public and other critical stakeholders. But what it appears to me is that either way, it's still problematic, because the Prime Minister is the one selecting the president. It's just that if there's agreement, it's going to take longer, right? The confirmation is a joint sitting of both the houses, at both houses, a joint sitting of both houses, which again, if you have a government that has a majority, then they are the ones basically doing the selecting. So it goes back to the Prime Minister being the one appointing the president. It mentions the tenure. He mentioned the tenure, I should say. All of this I was extracting from Mr. Harper's presentation. It's a proposed 7 years as the first term, with an additional term not to exceed 5 years. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, because there were some interactions with the public where that term seems to be a little bit problematic for some people. Okay. So, moving on, there was the expansion of senators. I don't know why the Senate needs to be expanded. Does anybody know? Because I don't know. I actually tried to do some research and see Why? Yeah, I don't have an answer. So again, if you have any information to offer on that, link me. One thing I will say, and there were various things discussed in this presentation that really needs further dissected. It needs to be dissected further and discussed further, and it really needs the guidance of a constitutional expert. I mean, there are some things in this bill that are a very, very big deal. For example, the alterations to Section 49. There is a 14-day, any bill that is going to change this section of the Constitution has to be introduced 14 days at the introduction and at the commencement of debate, and a further 14 days has to elapse between the conclusion of the debate and the passage of any bill, amending the ordinary provisions of the Constitution to prevent tabling and passing in a single session without due consideration of the provisions. I mean, very happy about that, considering what happened with the DPP, right? Where the Constitution was amended in a day to extend the retirement age of the DPP. So it would appear that it's being recognised that, there was a lot of criticism over that. Julian Robinson, the opposition spokesman on finance, said that the introduction of legislation and the manner in which it was done could compromise the independence and impartiality of the DPP's office. So, again, as I was saying, these alterations here really need the input of, a constitutional lawyer, and I'm not. So I'll be looking out for input on, the constitutional, the constitutional minds, the brilliant ones we have in Jamaica, dissecting this bill. Moving on again, this bill is complex, and it's very important to understand and to give it, the appropriate time to understand these changes that are being proposed. So, under the citizenship clause, Clause 7 says that it retains protections for birth, descent, and marriage, for citizenship from being deprived, right? But it also says that, sorry, I've lost that place. It basically said that, sorry, I appear to have lost that part, but what it basically says is that the government has the ability to, here it is, I'm sorry. There is a discretionary power to grant or deprive citizenship in specified circumstances. Don't have any more information on that, but that would be really interesting to know what that is. How you can be deprived of your Jamaican citizenship. Ms. Malahoo Fort basically said that the government already has a broad picture, and they know what the end product will look like. So time is going to tell, right, to exactly what that end product is. And that, hopefully that takes place, or hopefully it has to take place in the form of discussion and proper understanding of this bill. Yes, what is critical is that it's fully understood before the passage of any bill and any referendum. So that was January 22. January 30, there was an article in the Gleaner, spat over constitutional reform continues. Marlene Malahoo Fort dismissed as false claims by the parliamentary opposition that the government was trying to push the constitutional reform process down the throats of Jamaicans. But Ms. Malahoo Fort feels that if anything is being pushed down the throats of Jamaicans, it's the ascension to the appellate jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice. So the fussing and the fighting continues. Ms. Malahoo Fort is quoted again in an article by The Observer, in which the title is PNP Playing Politics with Constitutional Reform Process. And basically it says that she also used the occasion to answer the 4 questions that were posed by Mark Goldin. Personally, I didn't hear that. I listened to that next hearing, right, which was, I believe, January 29. But what happens is I missed it live, and when you go then to listen to it on YouTube, it doesn't always capture the whole sit-in. So she may well have answered those 4 questions, but in what's on YouTube, I didn't hear it, personally. But that doesn't say it didn't happen, because it got cut off. Okay, so basically what she was saying is that the matter of the final court will come forward. And she says, we do not see which court as a matter. We do not see which court as a matter of a JLP court. We see that it will have to be determined in the context of which court will seek the interests of Jamaicans, right? She says, I get the sense that she's basically saying it doesn't matter what is said or what answers are provided, that the opposition would separate from the process anyway. And she's saying that it would have been more appropriate for Mark Goldin to have requested a meeting with the Prime Minister to ask the questions that he had, but since his intention was for the matters to be placed squarely in the public domain, the questions are going to be answered in the public domain. But on the question of, it says here that the question of why the government hadn't reintroduced the bills in Parliament relating to the CCJ becoming Jamaica's final appellate court, Ms. Malahoo Fort wasn't really clear in her response. She said, the truth is that now there's no consensus on which final court is best for Jamaica, but there are 3 options for consideration. She said those options are Jamaica having its own final court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, or the Privy Council. I'm going to disagree there, because is Jamaica's own final court really an option? Jamaica's paid millions of dollars. We're going to come to that, but Jamaica paid millions of dollars to help establish the Caribbean Court of Justice, and is already utilising it. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So she acknowledged, she said, look, I understand the argument about Jamaica making the CCJ its final appellate court. It's understood, that with the country already being part of the court, that's understood. It subscribes, Jamaica is part of the originating jurisdiction, the original jurisdiction, right? That deals with the Treaty of Chagaramas as a CARICOM member. But what she said is that it's not true to say that Jamaica is paying for the CCJ that is not being used as claimed by Mark Goldin. And she brushed aside Mark Goldin's question, in which he suggested that by retaining the Privy Council, many Jamaicans were being left behind. She insisted that the majority of Jamaicans get justice in the trial court, and in particular in the parish courts. And in further insisted that there's no logic in doing the reform in phases. She insisted further that there is logic in doing the reform in phases, pointing out that the issue of the final court would be addressed in phase 2. Jamaicans get justice in the Caribbean Court of Justice too. And yes, Jamaica's already a part of the CCJ, and Jamaicans are using it, right? Remember the case Shanique Myrie and the state of Barbados? That's nicknamed the CCJ's case of the decade, right? That dispute involved a claim by Ms. Myrie, a Jamaican. She went to Barbados, and it's alleged that she was mistreated. She was denied entry to Barbados, and which amounted to a serious breach of her right to free movement under Article 5 of the Treaty of Chaguaramas. The court concluded that Ms. Myrie, that Barbados had breached her rights to enter Barbados, and ordered them to compensate her, right, which amounted to about 3.6 million Jamaican dollars she was awarded, and she was given costs. They had to pay her legal costs as well. So Jamaicans can and are utilising the CCJ, but there's an article in the Gleaner where Winston Anderson says, this ain't a good look. What does that mean? Well, Winston Anderson is a senior judge in the Caribbean Court of Justice, at the Caribbean Court of Justice. And he said that Jamaica has a legal obligation to adopt the CCJ as its final appellate court, saying that the country's had ample time to consider its secession. So who is Winston Anderson? On June 15, 2010, Professor Anderson was sworn in as judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice in a ceremony at King's House, Jamaica. The Honourable Mr. Justice Anderson has the distinction of being the first Jamaican, and at age 49, the youngest judge ever appointed to the Caribbean Court of Justice. He was also the first whose swearing-in ceremony was specifically held in his country of origin, Jamaica. Yes, he was born in St. Anne. He was educated and called to the bar in Jamaica. So Mr. Anderson is saying Jamaica's under a legal obligation to join the court, so that there's continuity of government, because the government isn't represented by one party. It's an institution which endures whichever party is in power. When Jamaica signed on to the CCJ agreement, that was an international obligation that Jamaica assumed, and it therefore calls for the government of Jamaica, whichever party is in office, to fulfill that obligation. He further added that Jamaica didn't express any reservation about accepting the appellate provision when signing the agreement, unlike countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Vincent, the Grenadines and Suriname. So, not having entered a reservation is really a legal obligation on Jamaica to now follow through with its obligation. So regarding timing, Justice Anderson said, look, there's been a 20-year delay in fulfilling this obligation, and it's excessive. He said normally there's a reasonable amount of time that's given, 5 years, maybe even 10, but 20 too long. So he said, I think it's something that the parliamentarians in Jamaica really must consider very seriously. He went on to say that the CCJ's judgments are comparable to those of other apex courts, and the CCJ, those that have adopted the CCJ haven't faced any negative impacts on foreign investment or human rights protections. He said he's very proud to be serving, in the region, and that it's been a tremendous journey. And he said that, Jamaicans should take pride in the fact that, two of them contramanded, So there's him, and of course there's Chantal Anonayu. Excuse me. So he went on to say that if you speak to people from countries who are sending appeals to the CCJ, they're going to say that the court's doing a commendable job. So he concluded by saying, although there's no sanctions for failing to replace the Privy Council, it's not a good look when a country's undertaken an international obligation and then hasn't followed through. Now, let's rewind back to October 3, 2023. Because there's a Radio Jamaica News article that's titled PM to indicate government position on CCJ as Jamaica's final appellate court. And what it's Ms. Malahou Fort says here is, I should say that the government is paying close attention to the poll results on the matter concerning the final court, as well as all the other matters relating to constitutional reform. Mr. Speaker, there is and should be no disagreement that it is unacceptable and untenable to continue with an arrangement where Jamaicans need a visa to access their final court. That same article went on to state that in the latest RJR Gleaner Don Anderson poll, 58.9% of people were in favour of adopting the Caribbean Court of Justice as Jamaica's final court, while 23% said Jamaica should retain the UK-based Privy Council. I mean, that's why it's so important that the government's position is known on this final court. So, yes, that next Joint Select Committee meeting took place on January 29, right? It was quite a lengthy presentation about the Westminster model of governance, parliamentary responsibility, the responsibility of the cabinet to parliament, and the Prime Minister to the cabinet. But as I said, it was lengthy, so we're going to touch on that a next episode, right? But that was basically what that Joint Select Committee meeting was primarily about. There were, however, 36 students from Kingston Technical High School who were there with 3 of their teachers. Ms. Malahou Fort put a question to them that then I have a question about. Not a question, she made a statement. She said that basically they were trying to make sure that the highest law of the land, the Jamaican Constitution, was put in its proper form, which is great. But isn't the Privy Council higher than the Constitution of Jamaica? And the reason I say that is, don't they interpret the Constitution? So, really strictly speaking, they could rule on a matter as being unconstitutional, right? So then that would make the Privy Council of London the makers of the highest law of the land in Jamaica, right? I'd like to know what you think about that, because it did raise that question for me. Link me and let me know what you think. She also went on to say, how, when you vote, you get an opportunity to choose your leaders. And obviously that's only relating to members of parliament, right? The public doesn't vote for a senator, nor really the prime minister. I mean, or the president under this current bill. Even though the prime minister is an elected member of parliament, people don't vote for him as prime minister, right? He's put forward as the leader of the party. And then the winner, the winning party then assumes, that role, right? So people don't directly vote for the prime minister. Ms. Malahun Fort also said, you don't get to your highest appeal court unless you have something to appeal against. The courts that are of critical importance are your trial courts. Just saying we have to look on the administration of justice in order to do justice to the people. And I'm going to just bring up another point there. So you don't get to the highest court of appeal unless you have something to appeal against, right? Well, Vybz Kartel had something to appeal against. His liberty, right? And it cost him a whole heap of money going to the Privy Council, which the average Jamaican can't afford. That kind of justice price tag, right? As you'll recall, back in 2014, Vybz Kartel and his co-accused were convicted of the murder of Clive Williams. The Privy Council quashed the murder convictions, concluding that the decision to leave a tainted juror in place after it was discovered that attempts were made to tamper with the jury was fatal to the verdict. Right, so the case was sent back to the Court of Appeal in Jamaica, who had upheld the convictions, to decide whether they were to face the defendants, that is, the appellants, whether they were to face a second trial for the 2011 murder of Clive Williams. And the Court of Appeal said no. And they were released from custody, except... that there was a decline to prosecute, right? The DPP decided they weren't going to prosecute the case. So they were all released, except for Kahira Jones, because he was serving a sentence for an unrelated case. So the Privy Council made that ruling, right? And they also ordered the Jamaican government to cover the legal costs for Vybz Kartel and his co-accused. Now, the Jamaican government itself spent in the region of $36 million just for the lawyers that were representing Jamaica. You can basically quadruple that then, right? 4 more times for that. For each 4 accused, and you have the costs of that case coming somewhere to around 150 million Jamaican dollars. So that's why a lot of people say there is an issue, there is a barrier to justice where the Privy Council is concerned, because it is so expensive to basically bring a case there. Okay, so speaking of students, the Observer ran an article January 26, where Westmoreland students support move to Republic. This was really nice to see. They spoke to some students who gave some, great input. But one thing was consistent, which a few of them said, and that is that they don't like the 7-year term for the president. They feel it's too long, and that the 7 years should really be more like 5 years. But a young man named Mr. Chin from Petersfield High School said that the event that they attended was an eye-opener. He said he strongly supports the shift to a republic, as it would mean that Jamaica would no longer be bound to the British monarchy. he also went on to say that, while there might be some downsides to losing the protective influence of the English monarchy, the benefits of independence far outweighed those concerns. That wasn't elaborated on either, so I don't know what those what that protective influence is, and I don't know what. It didn't say what those were. The session also included students from Godfrey Stewart, Rhodes Hall, and Maud MacLeod high schools. There was also another article where students from Westmoreland participated in the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs Road to Republic School Engagement Session. The head boy, Mr. Christoph, said that, Mr. Williams said that he is in support of, let me back up a bit. He actually said that he believes it's a sure go. He said the people of Jamaica, I believe, are in full support of this. Our identity is one of the most important things, and it's time for us to take ourselves away from the past and to the present. That is Jamaica. He also said he's in support of a 5-year term for the president instead of the proposed 7 years. And that he hopes that the political structure will be one that provides more opportunity for citizens to go to the polls to select their leadership. Ms. Irvin said that the session was informative and that she came away with a better understanding of the benefits of Jamaica transitioning from a monarchy to a republic. So, very valuable. The understanding of this process by our young people, right? So as Miss Irvin said, she got a better understanding of the benefits of Jamaica transitioning from a monarchy to a republic. Public education and public involvement is critical. So that brings us to the letter of the day that was in the Gleaner on January 30, that was actually titled Insufficient Time for Comment on Constitutional Amendment Bill. And I'm going to read you this letter. It says, a large and complicated document is available online. I second that. The recently tabled bill for constitutional amendment. I would not have been aware that a public comment period was available if I hadn't seen an advertisement in the Sunday Gleaner dated January 26, stating that the period for comments on the proposed bill ends on the 29th. I subsequently made a call to the Parliament, Gordon House, regarding this short period for public comment and was advised that the document was tabled in Parliament in the month of December 2024. It was expected that anyone who wished to make comments had the opportunity to do so from that time. I was also advised during this call that the notice for public comment advertisement was issued at first instance on January 19, with the comment period to end January 29. This period of 10 calendar days from the first publication of this notice in the public written media is insufficient. I don't recall hearing an announcement on the radio or television advertising requests for comment from the public this year. 10 calendar days for comment on a bill with such significant implications for governance in Jamaica is insufficient. The lack of real public consultation and information throughout the process hasn't allowed any timely and meaningful impact before it was tabled, making the process practically useless. Since the present government has made changing the constitution to a republic form of government an imperative, it should have been accompanied by a significant effort to include and inform the public during the process. Additionally, the town hall concept employed by the government has been ineffective because it doesn't allow for a free flow of information and is limited in its reach as a result of its format. Many Jamaicans have practical thoughts on governance but aren't heard from, and therefore these are not considered. The members of Parliament have been tasked to go into their constituencies to explain the reasoning behind the constitutional change and explain what the change entails. Finally, what is the point of change in the current constitution when most Jamaicans have no idea how the current one affects our present governance? It appears to me that a change at this time won't improve the governance, education or infrastructure of the country. So for me, the current constitutional reform operation is a waste of time. The newly created ministry could do better served to undertake an education activity to reach out to all Jamaican citizens, explaining the current constitution and its effects on our governance. If they can't do this, then the Ministry of Education should take up this activity. The current CRC, as it is called, has so far failed in its stated mandate to educate the public, and before any change is made to this new form of government, we need more and better explanations of the current constitutional system. And that was a letter by Hugh Dunbar of Bull Bay, St. Andrew. I'm going to go back to an article in 2023, October. It's called Public Education Campaign on Constitutional Reform to be Undertaken. And it basically says here, the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs and the Jamaica Information Service have entered into an agreement to execute a national public education campaign to enlighten Jamaicans about the country's constitutional reform process. The campaign will run for 2 years in 6-month implementation phases between August 1, 2023 and August 1, 2025. Engagements with members of the public have revealed a high level of ignorance among the people about the Constitution and basic governance concepts, as well as a lack of understanding of the structure of governance. And that was a statement made by Ms. Malahoo Fort. So then it begs the question, why do the public still not have that time to be educated, right? August 1, 2023 to August 1, 2025. It's important and very much needed. I'm going to leave you with the words of Danielle Archer, Director of National Integrity Action. Danielle Archer appeared on Reason with Rattigan, a podcast that took place on Saturday. And she was asked the question, what would you do if you were Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs? And here was her response. Before I could make a decision about going into phase 1, 2, 3 or 4, or whether or not it's going to be a phased basis, I would want to have had a public education campaign amongst all Jamaicans so that they understand what the current law is, what the current constitution is, and also to take into consideration what their main concerns are and were. Once I have done that assessment and created a feedback loop and created some kind of mechanism coming from the different counties and parishes, as well as the different stakeholder groups, not just the lawyers or the doctors, but the farmers and teachers, persons who are domestic workers, I would then have those sectors decide who they want their leaders to be on this panel or grouping. I would then take that information and decide what it is I would tackle first. So I would do my massive public education campaign, and I would do my public education campaign like how we attacked COVID-19, go into particular areas, ensuring that they understood what the current constitution says. It's almost like I would have given another shot at civics, because the constitution is not just a law. What the constitution is doing is giving us an understanding of how we want to operate as a society. So it would demand of me such an extensive public education campaign that I would have to twin it as well with a civics education, so that when I speak, people understand what I'm asking them about: a president, what it means to have a prime minister, what it means to have a different kind of president, an executive president, and what the functions are. After I've done that massive education campaign, then I would use the information I've got to create a decision-making platform as to what to do first and what to do next. It would not be just for me or the political directorate, because as legal and constitutional minister, I appreciate that what I'm doing now is simply guiding a team towards making a decision for a generation 50 years from now. So that is what I would have in my mindset. It's not about politics. It's not about being the first president of the republic. It's not about being the first person to craft the modern constitution. It would be about, how can I create a society that is so far different and highlights the best qualities of Jamaica, that gives us the best possible way to succeed. I wouldn't just be focusing on what other constitutions have done and said. I'd be focused on making a constitution that is curated to the culture of Jamaica, the expectations of the people, and also solve the problem of apathy and lack of interest in national affairs. I hope you're continuing to enjoy the journey, finding it educational and useful and ting. Our travels on the road to Jamaica becoming a republic continue. Let me say, though, this road can't be patched, right? It needs a totally torn up and laid down, properly drained, all of them ting their wood, right? Because this needs to last a long time. But I'm still confident that the journey will end with a truly independent and sovereign Jamaica, land we love. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Podcast Index, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Apple, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you want to reason about anything, or you can't find any of the material I was talking about, or you want to pose a question, an answer to any of the questions I was asking, you can email me on atasteofja@outlook.com. Just as a reminder, if you're not registered to vote, March 31, 2025 is the deadline to register for the next voters list. And that's scheduled to be published on May 31, 2025. So until the next time, thank you for supporting this podcast. Please subscribe, follow, share with your family and friends. And again, I thank you for taking the time to listen. One love. Yes, the word is love.